Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Rose, and this is going to be part two of the three-part video series. We're going to talk about, honestly, my personal growing pains when I started my company, and how I navigated them, and then the portfolio that I built and still continue to build through trade work and spec work to get future work. So let's get into it. All right. The majority of my work is wedding photography. And then I also do brand work and interiors. And then I'll do one off projects that are lifestyle, typically maternity, newborn, and family. And this was my idea from the get go when I started because I was drawn to all forms or I guess like categories of photography. And when I started, at the end of 2019, when I went off on my own, there was this really big push to niche into a certain category. But then the pandemic hit and weddings, like large weddings, quickly crumbled. And again, just being like aware and looking at the industry and looking at others around me, my note from the get go was I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket. So I think even though I'm a photographer, I think this can be applied to all different kinds of artists slash business owners. And I say them separately because I do think there's the art, the making, the craftsman part. And then there's also the business where you have your clients, you have to market to your clients, and you have to sell that art. So I do think they're separate, but they have to work together for you to be able to like live off of it. So one of my mentors, they said like you have to feed both. You know, if you feed the artist, then you have to feed the business. And at that time, at the beginning of 2020, I was like, oh no, I cannot only put all my energy into weddings. And that was something I wrote down from the get go. So while doing that, when I was building that portfolio, I necessarily didn't have like clients of my own because I had always worked with clients that were under the agency. And so I looked around and I was like, well, small business owners like myself need photography. And I have this advertising and lifestyle imagery background. Let me work with them. But I didn't have any of this in my portfolio at the level or like for that market. So what I would do is I'd reach out to a few makers that I was really drawn to and I loved their work. And I asked, for a trade for the object or, whatever they made. I would take photos of it and I would focus on portraits of them to introduce them, portraits of their work, hero shots of just their work, but also them interacting with it so they could have imagery that told a story of what they do. And that's what built my brand section. And it stemmed from me being interested because I think if you're not interested and you're about to go do something for free, you really have to like something to do a good job with it. And I think that's where I've seen some people get into like a pickle where they know they need work, they know they need spec work, but they aren't strategic with who they're giving that energy and time to. So making sure it's truly aligned with what you are, you would maybe purchase on your own, or something that, yeah, you would spend your free time with. That's a good start for it being successful. And then overly communicating everything. I think good communication can squash any really, because it doesn't need to be a fire, right? Like time management and communication can solve most problems as a small business owner. So when I would do these trades, if I had any snafus with like maybe the service or the process was miscommunicated, I would immediately call that business owner or person or maybe do a video call. Try not to have the communication just be over email because I think that's where things can get a little hostile and the time it takes to solve a problem from one inbox to the other could just be solved on a video call or a phone call. So having the communication skills is huge. And then knowing when it might not be a good fit to continue a trade is also really big. But each time you do anything, with your art form and it's with business, the strategy behind it is you're trying to see, does that service work? Does what is my offer? And like, is that offer clear? Is it wanted? Like, ask that business owner or whoever that client is, for feedback, because it's just a test for then when you have a client that is going to pay you, all of those hiccups should have been solved from the trade work. So it's okay if something isn't smooth, it's not supposed to be. But then once you have it down, that's when you need to say no to trades, because at the end of the day, the monetary exchange between a service of that art form and having a client, there will be more weight to the work. The client will care more, you'll care more, and you'll be able to live. So I think that's really important, knowing when, yes, we have trade, yes, we have trial and error, but the end goal is to have paying clients for that service or offering. Um, and I think that was one of the biggest growing pains for me, was saying, I wasn't good at saying no, and too many things excited me, and I wanted to work with everyone. But at the end of the day, I had to look at those business numbers as well. Like, can I live off of this? If not, we need to adjust. So diversifying my portfolio was huge. When wedding photography went down, my brand work went up. I don't use it often, but I do have an Instagram page dedicated to my brand and interior work, just so something is up there and I get enough inquiries for that work based like on a rolling basis. And if weddings are ever slow, I also have like an archive of clients I can reach back out to and say like, hey, just reminding them if they need any work, I'm available. So knowing your different tiers of what your offerings are, you have like the the thing that makes you the most money. Maybe some passion projects that fuel you in your soul, but it can also be used for future work. Like to attract that future work. So that's really nice. And then having some constants that might not be the most fun, but they always provide like a steady amount of money. So you can focus on your art in that like playful space. Because when you don't have enough money, then you're scrambling, then you'll say yes to just anything, and then you'll be sad. So balancing that out, but knowing what you need at the beginning is really helpful, and always adjusting. So reflecting and taking the time to, if something didn't work, why did it not work? And how can you maybe optimize for the next time? And then on this page, again, if you didn't want to listen to all of that, here's a little takeaway page. And like, for instance, diversifying my portfolio has been huge. I have my small little projects that are consistent, but sometimes they're not the most exciting. And I have my large one off projects. They're not as consistent, but they do take up a large amount of my, gross income. And then spec work and trades, if you don't know where to start, that's a great place to start, because you actually have work to show and you will book whatever you show. And if it's not booking, then this is the hardest growing pain to realize, but you probably need to work back on your skill set a little bit and fine tune that, and then connect and like talk to more people, because sometimes people just don't know what you do. And if there's no awareness and they don't know what you do, how can they book you for it? So sharpen the skills, over communicate, and again, the try new things, connect with more people. With that triangle, you should somehow always have work. I've always had work by doing those three things. So those are my growing pains. That's how I got ahead of them. And now we're going to talk about, in the third video, burnout and longevity, and hopefully how to avoid the burnout part. So let's get over there.